September 12, 1958, 11:47 in the evening. The time would become etched into the collective memory of Harlem, whispered about in barbershops for decades, debated in street corners and late-night conversations in cramped tenement apartments. This was the night that everything changed. This was the night that a man named Big Sam Foster raised a pistol to the back of the head of the only person he'd ever truly called brother and pulled the trigger. What came next wasn't just a moment in time. It was a reckoning that would reshape the entire landscape of power in New York City. Big Sam's hand was trembling so violently that he had to grip the pistol with both hands to keep it steady. $50,000. That was the amount the 5 families of New York's organized crime empire had placed on the head of one man, Ellsworth Raymond Johnson, the man they called Bumpy. And Sam, who had served as Bumpy's bodyguard for 5 years, who had stood beside him through street wars and police raids and the constant pressure of a world that wanted to crush him, had accepted the contract. The money would save his daughter's life, or so he'd been told. The plan had been explained to him in crystal detail by a man named Tony Marone, a specialist in the art of turning people. Tony didn't break bones or crack skulls. That was work for the low-level street thugs. Tony's expertise lay in finding the fractures that already existed in a man's soul, the places where desperation had worn through the walls of loyalty, and then he widened those cracks until the man fell apart completely. Tony had found Sam's weakness with surgical precision. Tuberculosis, his youngest daughter, Kesha, had been suffering from the disease for nearly 6 months. The hospital bills were mounting into amounts that Sam could never hope to pay on Bodyguard's salary, no matter how much prestige came with protecting someone like Bumpy Johnson. But before we get to that moment in Lenox Lounge, before we get to the click that echoed through the jazz club and changed everything, we need to understand who these men were. We need to understand what Harlem was in 1958 and why this moment mattered so much that it would ripple through the entire criminal underworld of America. Bumpy Johnson wasn't just another gangster. The newspapers sometimes called him that, trying to fit him into categories that had worked for Italian mobsters and street-level dealers. But Bumpy was something fundamentally different. He was Harlem's protector. He was the man who stood between his community and the wolves that circled endlessly at its borders, trying to find a way in. He was the bridge between the streets and the legitimate world. And by 1958, that made him perhaps the most powerful black man in New York City, though few people outside of Harlem fully understood it. The late 1950s was a dangerous time for Harlem. The neighborhood was under siege from multiple directions. The Italian mob families, specifically the Commission of 5 families that ruled New York's underworld, had been trying to take control of the numbers racket for years. The numbers game might sound quaint to modern ears, but it was an economic powerhouse. Poor people, people who couldn't afford traditional gambling or didn't have access to legitimate investment opportunities, would bet small amounts of money, nickels and dimes, quarters and dollar bills, on numbers they believed in. These bets accumulated into millions of dollars flowing through the black neighborhoods of New York every single day, and the Italian families wanted every penny of it. But there was an obstacle. His name was Bumpy Johnson. Bumpy had built something in Harlem that the Italian mobsters found almost incomprehensible. They understood power based on violence. You were powerful because you could hurt people more efficiently than they could hurt you. You were powerful because you had weapons and soldiers who would follow your orders without question, because the alternative was death. It was a straightforward equation. Fear equals power, respect follows fear, obedience follows respect. But Bumpy's power wasn't built on that foundation, or at least not primarily. Yes, Bumpy could be ruthless when the situation demanded it. He'd had people hurt, even killed, when they threatened his territory or his people. But his real power came from something more subtle and more lasting. It came from the fact that Harlem loved him. When families in the neighborhood couldn't pay their rent, Bumpy paid it. When landlords tried to evict widows with children, Bumpy appeared, and the evictions suddenly got delayed, then canceled. When police harassed black business owners, shaking them down, arresting people on false charges, Bumpy made phone calls to city officials and police captains. Those calls had weight. Those calls had consequences. The harassment would stop when Italian mobsters sent enforcers into Harlem to muscle in on local operations. Bumpy didn't negotiate. He pushed back hard, and those enforcers went back to their neighborhoods bruised and humiliated. With stories to tell about what happened when you tried to take what wasn't yours, the Italian families had tried everything that money and violence could buy. They'd sent their best enforcers into Harlem with orders to establish dominance. They'd come back in ambulances. They'd tried negotiating with Bumpy, offering him a cut if he'd share control of the numbers game. Bumpy had told them that Harlem wasn't for sale and never would be. They'd tried bribing the politicians who supposedly governed Harlem's affairs. But Bumpy had connections that went deeper, relationships built on genuine trust rather than transactional bribes. By 1958, the five families were reaching a level of desperation that made them dangerous in ways they didn't fully understand. Desperate men make decisions they wouldn't normally contemplate. That's when Frank Costello, the most powerful mob boss in all of New York, called an emergency meeting. All five families sent their representatives: the Gambinos, the Genoveses, the Luccheses, the Colombos, and the These were men who controlled billions of dollars in illicit operations. They controlled judges, police precincts, politicians, entire city blocks. They'd built an empire that answered to no one except themselves. And yet, they were sitting in a room discussing a single black man from Harlem who wouldn't do what they wanted. "We've tried force," Costello said, his voice cold and absolutely flat. The voice of a man who'd seen and done terrible things and had become almost emotionless in the process. "We've tried money. We've tried using our politicians to apply pressure. We've tried every conventional method available to us. None of it works. This man is untouchable. We need a different approach." "So what exactly are you suggesting?" Carlo Gambino asked, the man widely considered to be the second most powerful figure in organized crime. He was lighting a cigar with the relaxed demeanor of someone who felt completely in control of any situation. Costello leaned forward across the table. "We make him touchable. Every man has a weakness. Every man has a price point where his ideals become negotiable. We find the person he trusts completely without question, and we turn them. We corrupt the one relationship that he depends on, that will either destroy him or force him to make a mistake." That's when someone mentioned Big Sam Foster. Samuel Foster, known to everyone as Big Sam, had been working at Bumpy's side since 1953. He was 6 foot 4 inches tall, weighing 260 pounds of hard muscle developed through years of physical labor and street fighting. He was a man of profound loyalty, or at least he had been. He'd taken bullets for Bumpy Johnson twice. He'd been there when Bumpy's mother passed away, holding his boss while the man who'd built an empire revealed the rare vulnerability of grief. He'd been at Bumpy's side through the vicious territorial wars with the remnants of Dutch Schultz's old criminal organization, through endless police raids, through assassination attempts and betrayals, and all the thousand ways that the underworld tries to destroy men who grow too powerful. If anyone in Harlem had earned Bumpy's trust completely, it was Big Sam. If anyone could get close enough to kill Bumpy Johnson, to put a bullet in his skull without warning, it was the man who slept in the adjacent room, who carried the keys to Bumpy's private spaces, who was present in the most intimate moments of his life. The five families dispatched Tony Marone to make the approach. 3 weeks before the shooting, on August 20th, 1958, Big Sam was leaving his apartment building on 132nd Street in the middle of the afternoon. He was thinking about his daughter, about the constant sound of her struggling to breathe, about the way she tried to smile through her pain even as tuberculosis was slowly consuming her from the inside. Medical bills were stacking up on his kitchen table like an accusation. Hospital stays, medications that cost more money than he made in a week, treatments that seemed to help for a few days, and then the symptoms returned, worse than before. That's when the black Cadillac pulled up beside him. The window rolled down smoothly, electronically, a luxury that immediately signaled that whoever was inside this car had serious money. Tony Marone was sitting in the back seat, and he was smiling the way an insurance salesman smiles, all calculated warmth and false friendliness. "Sam, right? Big Sam?" Tony's voice was pleasant, almost cheerful. "I've heard a lot about you, good things. People say you're a solid guy, someone with integrity. That means something in our world." Sam's hand immediately moved toward the waistband of his pants where he kept a .45 caliber pistol. It was an automatic response, the kind of caution that kept a man alive in Harlem. "Who's asking?" And who are you to be asking it? A friend, Tony said. Someone who wants to make you a very wealthy man? Someone who understands that loyalty is important, but so is survival. So is taking care of your family. Tony gestured toward the empty seat beside him in the Cadillac. Just 5 minutes. Listen to what I have to say. If you don't like it, you walk away. No hard feelings, no repercussions. I give you my word on that, and my word is something I've built my reputation on. Sam knew he should walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around and go back into his apartment building. But curiosity, that most dangerous of emotions, got the better of him. He got into the car. Tony didn't waste any time with preliminaries. He launched directly into the vulnerability that he'd identified. You're a smart man, Sam. I can see that just by looking at you. You know how this world works. You're loyal to Bumpy Johnson, and that's admirable. That kind of loyalty is actually rare these days. People talk a good game, but when the pressure gets real, they fold. You're not like that. You're the kind of man who'd take a bullet for someone you believed in. Tony paused, letting the words sink in. But loyalty doesn't pay for your daughter's medical bills. Loyalty doesn't cure tuberculosis. Loyalty doesn't buy your family a way out of the poverty that's slowly suffocating all of you. Sam's jaw tightened. The muscles along his neck became rigid. Tony had found the fracture and was now pressing directly into it. Your youngest Kesha, right? Tony continued. And the casual way he used the name made Sam's blood run cold. This man had done his homework. He knew details about Sam's life that Sam's own boss might not even know. She's been sick for 6 months now. The disease has her lungs. The hospital visits, they're not helping as much as they should, are they? The doctors, they want more money for different treatments. Experimental stuff, better drugs. All of it costs money that you don't have. Tony opened a leather briefcase. The interior was lined with neat stacks of $100 bills, all facing the same direction, all absolutely pristine. The money seemed to glow in the afternoon light coming through the Cadillac's windows. $50,000, Tony said quietly. That's what we're offering you. Not to hurt anyone, not to do anything except what I'm about to describe. $50,000, which is enough to pay every medical bill your daughter has accumulated. It's enough to pay for whatever new treatments she needs. It's enough to move your family to Miami, or California, or anywhere in this country where the air is clean and where your daughter can breathe properly again. It's enough to give your family a future instead of a slow death sentence. Sam stared at the money. His eyes couldn't look away from it. $50,000 in 1958 was an absolutely staggering amount of money. A working man might make $3,000 in a year if he was lucky. This was more than 15 years of salary. This was freedom. This was survival. For what? Sam asked, though he already knew the answer. Some part of him had always known what this conversation was, leading to. Tony closed the briefcase slightly, so the money wasn't quite as visible, and then he began to describe what they wanted. We want you to walk into Lennox's lounge on Friday night, September 12th, Tony said. Bumpy will be there. He goes there every Friday night without fail. He sits at his usual corner table and conducts business, meets with people, drinks Hennessy, and lives his life like he's invincible. We want you to be there too, which won't be unusual because you're always near him. You're his bodyguard. Your presence at that club would be completely normal, completely expected. No one would think twice about it. Tony's voice took on an almost clinical tone, as if he were describing a business transaction rather than a murder. Wait until he's distracted. Maybe he's talking to someone important. Maybe he's focused on the music or watching the crowd. We don't care. Just wait for a moment when his attention is elsewhere. Then you draw your weapon, which you carry anyway. You aim at the back of his head. You pull the trigger, one shot, clean and simple. Then you move toward the exit. We'll have a car waiting in an alley behind the club. You get in that car, and you disappear. We have new identities for your whole family. New documents, new lives. By morning, you'll be in Miami. By next week, you'll be someone else entirely. No one will connect you to what happened. You'll be a ghost. Sam stared at Tony without speaking. The implications were massive. The consequences would be permanent. He would spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. He would never be able to return to Harlem. He would never see any of his friends again. He would be severing every connection to the life he'd built over 40-some years. But but his daughter would live. That was the thought that kept returning to him, that kept hammering at his sense of right and wrong. His daughter would have medical care. His daughter would have a chance. And if I say no? Sam asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Tony's smile faded completely. What replaced it was something much colder, much more genuine. This was the real Tony Maroney, stripped of the pleasant insurance salesman affectation. Then your daughter dies slowly in that charity ward hospital ward, with tubes in her arms and her lungs filling with fluid until she can't breathe anymore. And you keep working for Bumpy, watching your back every single day, knowing that one day, a bullet with your name on it is coming. Because that's how this life ends. Sam, you know it. I know it. Everyone in this world knows it. The only question is whether you die poor, having watched your family suffer, or whether you die rich, having given them options. Whether you die having been useful, or whether you die having been loyal to a man who doesn't actually care about you the way you think he does. The words were designed to hurt, and they did. They found every insecurity and every doubt that had been accumulating. In Sam's mind over the months of his daughter's illness, Sam got out of the car without saying another word. He couldn't bear to be in that space any longer. But, as he closed the door, Tony left the briefcase on the seat, with the money visible, tempting, calling to him. It was a psychological manipulation, leaving the evidence of what could be his, showing him exactly what $50,000 looked like in physical form. That night, Sam Foster couldn't sleep. He lay in bed while his daughter coughed in the next room, and he kept seeing her face, kept hearing her labored breathing, kept remembering the way she tried to smile and maintain some kind of normalcy even as her body was being destroyed from the inside by disease. He kept seeing that briefcase, kept picturing what $50,000 could do for his family, new house, new doctors, a chance at life instead of a slow fade into medical bankruptcy and loss. 3 days later, Sam made his decision. He called the number that Tony had left him, written on a small piece of paper. "I'm in," Sam said. His voice sounded hollow, as if someone else was speaking through him. "But I want the money up front. Half now, half after it's done." "Done," Tony replied immediately, and there was a note of triumph in his voice. "Welcome to the winning side." What Big Sam didn't know, what Tony Marone didn't know, what the entire 5 families didn't know, was that before Sam even stepped into that black Cadillac for his appointment with Tony, Bumpy Johnson already knew about the approach. Not suspected, not imagined, knew with absolute certainty. Bumpy Johnson didn't become the king of Harlem by trusting people blindly. He became king by knowing people, by understanding human nature with almost supernatural clarity, by accepting as a fundamental truth that every man has a price, every man has a weakness, and every man can be bought or broken if you find the right pressure point. Bumpy had built an intelligence network that would have impressed a government spy agency. Bartenders reported to him, shoeshine boys on street corners reported what they heard, cab drivers reported who got into which cars, janitors reported conversations they overheard while cleaning offices, parking attendants reported license plates and vehicle descriptions. All of these people that the Italian mob never even considered as potential informants because they seemed to level, too invisible to matter. They were all Bumpy's eyes and ears throughout Harlem. One of those people, a parking attendant named Jerome, who worked on 132nd Street, had seen Tony Marona's black Cadillac pull up outside of Big Sam's apartment building. Jerome had watched Sam get into the car. He'd watched the minutes tick by. He'd seen Sam get out of the car and walk back toward his building with the kind of posture that suggested he'd just been through something emotionally significant. Jerome had written down the license plate number. 2 hours later, Jerome was in Bumpy's office above Small's Paradise Jazz Club. "Tony Marone," Jerome said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk toward Bumpy. It contained the license plate number and a description of the man Jerome had seen in the car. His Cadillac was parked outside Big Sam's place this morning. Sam got in, stayed for about 5 minutes, then he got out and went back inside. Bumpy looked at the paper, then at Jerome. His expression was unreadable. "You're absolutely sure it was Marone?" Bumpy asked. "Positive," Jerome said. "I've seen him before. He collects payments from the Italian-run joints over on the east side. That's definitely the guy." Bumpy was silent for a long moment, maybe 2 minutes of complete silence, where he just sat there, processing information. Then, he opened his desk drawer, pulled out $500 bills, and handed them to Jerome. "You didn't see anything," Bumpy said. "You weren't there. You weren't paying attention. You don't know anything. Understand?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson." After Jerome left, Bumpy sat in his office for 2 hours, just thinking, just processing. Sam had been with him for 5 years. Good years, mostly loyal years. They'd been through wars together. Bumpy had trusted him with his life, on more occasions than he could count. They'd shared private conversations. They'd developed something that resembled genuine brotherhood. And now the Italians were whispering in Sam's ear, dangling money and promises in front of him. Bumpy could have had Sam killed right then. One phone call and Big Sam Foster would have disappeared into the East River with weights attached to his feet, his body dissolving into the water and the dark. Most men in Bumpy's position would have done exactly that. Eliminate the threat, eliminate the problem, move on to the next challenge. It was the logical response. It was the safe response. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't most men. Over the next 3 weeks, as September progressed toward its 12th day, Bumpy watched Sam carefully. He observed the way Sam's hands sometimes shook when he thought no one was looking. He saw the worry in Sam's eyes when they discussed daily business. He saw a man struggling with an impossible choice, one that was tearing him apart internally. Loyalty or survival. The love of a daughter versus the bonds of brotherhood. Poverty and loss versus wealth and escape. And then Bumpy made a decision that showed why he was fundamentally different from every other criminal power in New York. He wouldn't kill Sam, but he would teach him. Bumpy called in a favor from an old gunsmith in Brooklyn, a man named Victor who'd been modifying firearms for Bumpy for 15 years. Victor was a craftsman, someone who understood weapons at a deeper level than most people understood anything. "I need you to do something for me," Bumpy said when he met with Victor. "And it needs to be perfect. I need you to create a gun that doesn't work, but it needs to look absolutely perfect. It needs to feel perfect in the hand. It needs to have the exact weight and balance of a real weapon. But when someone pulls the trigger, nothing happens. No bullet, no firing pin strike, just a click." Victor was initially confused. "You want a gun that's broken? A dummy gun?" "Not a dummy gun," Bumpy clarified. "A very convincing dummy gun. A gun that someone would use, thinking it was real. Can you do it?" Victor could do it. Within 3 days, he'd delivered a modified .38 special revolver that looked absolutely identical to the gun Sam had been carrying for the past 5 years. Same weight, same feel, same action when you pulled the trigger, except for the crucial difference that no bullet would fire. Instead, there would just be a click, the sound of a firing pin striking an empty chamber. The next part of Bumpy's plan required precision timing and execution. He needed to swap Sam's real gun with the dummy gun without Sam noticing. That meant entering Sam's apartment when Sam wasn't there. On September 8th, 4 days before the scheduled assassination, Bumpy sent Sam on an errand across town to the Bronx. "I need you to pick up an envelope from a contact I have in the Bronx," Bumpy instructed. "It's important business. Don't come back without it." The errand would take Sam at least 3 hours, maybe more. Plenty of time. While Sam was gone, Bumpy and his most trusted associate, a man named Illinois Gordon who'd been with him almost as long as Sam, led themselves into Sam's apartment. They found Sam's gun in a shoebox under the bed, exactly where Bumpy knew it would be. They swapped it with Victor's dummy gun. Sam would never know the difference. The weight was identical. The feel was identical. Everything about it seemed real. Now, Bumpy had to wait. He had to sit with the knowledge of what was coming and let events unfold. Because if Bumpy confronted Sam before the assassination attempt, Sam could deny everything. The Italians could find another traitor, another weak point in Bumpy's organization. The cycle would continue endlessly. No, Bumpy needed Sam to pull the trigger. He needed Sam to commit to the betrayal. He needed Sam to reveal himself completely. And then, in that ultimate moment of betrayal, Bumpy would reveal the truth. Not just to Sam, but to every person in that room, to all of Harlem, to the 5 families. The message would be clear and unmistakable. You can't kill Bumpy Johnson because Bumpy Johnson is always 3 moves ahead. September 12, 1958, 11:47 at night. Lenox Lounge was absolutely packed that evening. The Friday night crowd had come out in force. There were probably 300 people in the club. Musicians playing jazz that made people forget their troubles for a moment, hustlers and businessmen conducting deals in dark corners, politicians from City Hall discussing zoning decisions and police budgets, women in elegant dresses, men in sharp suits, the kind of crowd that represented the entire spectrum of Harlem society, from the street level up to the legitimate business owners. Bumpy was at his usual corner table. He was wearing an impeccable gray suit that had been tailored specifically for him. His trademark fedora was resting on the table beside him. In front of him was a glass of Hennessy that he hadn't touched. He was engaged in a serious conversation with two city councilmen about a new housing development that was being planned for the Sugar Hill neighborhood. These were the kinds of conversations that shaped the future of Harlem, that determined whether the community would be allowed to develop on its own terms, or whether outside forces would control that development. Big Sam arrived at 11:30. He'd been drinking beforehand, not enough to be drunk, but enough to quiet the screaming doubts in his mind, just enough to steady his nerves. In his jacket pocket was the .38 Special, the gun he thought was his service weapon, the gun he believed would make him $50,000 richer and give his daughter a chance at life. Sam positioned himself near the bar, watching, observing Bumpy at his table, waiting for the right moment. Bumpy had his back turned, focused completely on the conversation, vulnerable in a way that Bumpy rarely was. At 11:47, Sam made his move. He walked through the crowd. His hand went inside his jacket and gripped the pistol. Nobody noticed. Sam was always near Bumpy. He was the bodyguard. His presence was normal, expected. People paid no attention to him. He came up behind Bumpy's chair, 6 feet away, then 4, then 2. He drew the gun. The bartender saw it first. His eyes went wide with shock and horror, but before he could shout a warning, before he could alert anyone, Sam had already aimed at the back of Bumpy's head and pulled the trigger. Click. That sound, that single click, the sound of a firing pin hitting nothing, it echoed through the club like a gunshot, except it wasn't. The jazz band stopped mid-no, conversations died mid-sentence. 300 people turned to look at Big Sam standing there with a useless gun in his shaking hand, and Bumpy Johnson sitting completely calmly in his chair, not even flinching, not even reacting as if anything unusual had happened. Bumpy took a slow sip of his cognac, the glass touched his lips. He swallowed. Then, he set the glass down gently on the table in front of him. He turned around slowly in his chair. His eyes met Sam's eyes directly. And in that look was something more terrifying than anger could ever be. It was complete and utter disappointment. It was the look of a man who'd been let down by someone he cared about. "I've been counting on you," Bumpy said quietly. His voice was calm and measured, but it seemed to carry through the entire silent room, seemed to reach every ear and lodge itself in every consciousness. Those 5 words hit Sam harder than any bullet ever could have, because in that instant, in that moment, Sam understood everything. Bumpy had known. He'd known about the approach from Tony Marone. He'd known about the $50,000. He'd known about the plan. He'd known everything. And instead of killing Sam, instead of making him disappear into the river, instead of taking the route that every other mobster would have taken, Bumpy had let him walk into this room. Bumpy had let him pull that trigger. Bumpy had let him reveal himself to 300 witnesses. Bumpy had let him destroy his own reputation and his own honor in front of the entire community. Bumpy had orchestrated his complete and total humiliation without firing a single shot. Sam's gun clattered to the floor. His legs gave out. He sank to his knees. "I'm sorry, God," Sam whispered. "I'm sorry, Bumpy. I'm sorry, my daughter." "I know about your daughter," Bumpy interrupted. His voice was still quiet, but it carried through the silent room with absolute authority. "I've known about Kesha's illness for 6 months. You think I don't take care of my people? You think I wouldn't know that one of my closest associates was struggling?" Bumpy Johnson's confrontation with Big Sam Foster at Lenox Lounge became a defining moment that demonstrated true power, rather than resorting to violence. Bumpy revealed that he had known about the assassination attempt for 3 weeks, a strategic test to expose Sam's betrayal before 300 witnesses. By paying Kesha's medical bills and offering compensation, Bumpy proved that loyalty couldn't be bought by outsiders. This incident rippled through New York's criminal underworld. The 5 families recognized they couldn't defeat Bumpy through force, money, or corruption. Carlo Gambino concluded that the only logical course was to concede Harlem to Bumpy and focus their operations elsewhere, an unprecedented decision in organized crime history. The story became legendary in Harlem, passed down through generations as a foundational myth about loyalty and true power. Rather than being remembered as a ruthless gangster, Bumpy Johnson became a symbol of intelligent strategy and respect-based leadership. When he died in 1968 at Lenox Lounge from a heart attack, his legacy endured not from weapons or violence, but from his superior understanding of human nature and his ability to stay several moves ahead of his opponents. The real lesson is that genuine power comes from intelligence and strategy, not from force, a principle that defined Bumpy's reign and secured his place in history.